As you saw in the agenda, we want to talk a little bit about the current state of monitoring and evaluation here. I'll give a few remarks, but then we really want to let Mala and Monica run the show because they are the ones that are actually walking and talking the talk. So I'm going to start us off just by talking about kind of the state of where we see M&E right now. So currently, as I'm sure most of you guys know, is really the trend that a lot of our M&E plans are done at the project level. The vast majority of projects require a monitoring and evaluation framework at the outset. And so we are pretty accustomed to, building the requirement for an M&E framework within the context of a grant. Of course, this also aligns with the way that we know a lot of our projects are funded. And since we're building our M&E framework around a particular project, we tend to have indicators that are very specific to that project. So for example, if we're working on a maternal and child health project, one of our key performance indicators or KPIs might be something like the number of women who have gone to at least 4 antenatal visits, during the course of their pregnancy. And of course, we know that these indicators are defined and set by a bunch of different people. You've got stakeholders within the project, like the local country team, hopefully the beneficiaries, if you've included them in it. At the organizational or sort of HQ level, we might have certain indicators that we're interested in tracking. And of course, it'll be a surprise to no one that our donors often have a lot of input on some of the things that we track as well. And this sort of monitoring and evaluation is super important. This is what actually allows us to see the true impact of a project. But what do we miss by looking at this project level M&E? One, you miss the ability to compare across projects within one singular organization. So for example, if you had one project that was looking at coffee farming and another project that was looking at, say, child growth monitoring, it would be almost impossible to compare those projects. Similarly, even if you have 2 projects that are similar interventions within the same sector, if you've not aligned on your KPIs, it could also be really difficult to compare across those if you're collecting different sets of data and different indicators. And lastly, you miss the ability to speak to the overall impact of your organization. Don't you think it would be super powerful to be able to go to donors and say something like, 90% of our projects last year hit all of their key performance indicators? I don't know of hardly any organizations right now that can speak to their impact on an organizational level like that, but wow, that would be really powerful if you could. And so it's at this point that I want everyone to stop and just think about their organization for a second. We know that you guys represent a whole diverse set of organizations. Some of you are NGOs, whether they're local, country level, international. Some of you are small for-profits, and kind of all the way in between. And the portfolio of projects or programs that your organizations serve will all be different. And so the way that you approach a global M&E system is going to be different based on the composition of that. So on my left-hand side, we've got this Apple icon. And so this is if you implement programs that are largely similar. So you're really focused on one intervention. Maybe it's like family planning methods, or maybe it is coffee farming, something really, really targeted. Then you might be doing kind of what we call an apples to apples comparison. So your projects look mostly the same and are achieving the same broad goals. Then on the right-hand side, we have what I'm calling the fruit basket, or what we might say like the apples to oranges comparison, which is you have a super diverse portfolio of different projects, and you somehow need to make sense of how do I compare a child protection project with an HIV project with a coffee farming project. And that obviously is kind of a whole different animal. So as we're talking about this, think about where you lie between those two, and we're going to go over both of those. Between these two, I don't think Mala and Monica and Goal and ChildFund don't fit squarely between them. But if I had to say, I would say that ChildFund is a little more of our apples to apples, and Goal is a little bit more of our fruit basket. So keep that in mind too as you're listening to Mala and Monica talk. But no matter what, Determining true impact means creating global systems for M&E. So no matter what model you guys have, whether you're the apples to apples or the fruit basket, it's really important that we focus on creating global systems for M&E that allow us to compare across projects, sectors, organizations, and geographies. And so how do we start looking beyond the project? Here, like I said, the first step is going to be standardizing your global indicators. And so again, this is why it's really important to know where you sit on this spectrum of implementing the same intervention versus a different intervention everywhere. It's going to look very different how you standardize your indicators depending on the sort of projects that you are implementing. And so we're going to go through these two examples separately and talk about kind of what that looks like, and also talk about the ways that CommCare could help you standardize your indicators and report out on global M&E. So what happens if you have the same projects in multiple geographies? This again is our apples to apples comparison. So we're looking at running the same intervention in different geographies. So it could be something like we run family planning projects in 25 countries. The project is the same everywhere, but the geography is different. It might also be something like we and 3 other consortium partners run the same intervention with all of our organizations in the same city. So it could be something like that too. In this sort of a situation, the organization or the consortium will agree at the outset what those standardized indicators are. So if it's something like, access to contraception, maybe a key performance indicator is something around the number of commodities dispersed or something. We would anticipate, of course, that there might be some local customizations, but none that would affect the key indicators. So again, looking at this family planning example, maybe Indonesia decides that they want to add a form to survey people's knowledge, attitude, and practices. That's fine. Indonesia can do that, and the other countries don't have to. But again, that would not be considered a key performance indicator at the global level. So any sort of customizations shouldn't take away from those global indicators. One of the really cool features that we have that we're excited to launch in the next few months is what we're calling enterprise release management. And this is something that we are really hoping would help you guys quite a bit with your running these kind of apples to apples projects. This will allow you to build your application and all the supporting things. So things like custom user data, lookup tables, anything that goes along with that app, as well as reports. You can build that in one, what we're calling master project space, and then push it down to as many child spaces as you need. What's really great about this is that once you push that app downstream, it's frozen. So there's actually not the ability for your users to make changes. Your users might not love it, but those of you who really like a standardized indicator will love it. And in addition to pushing down the application, you can push down custom reports and keywords and a bunch of other things. So I'm going to take you into CommCare and show you this. And it's been a half hour, so I've been logged out. Bear with me. Just accidentally showing you guys some of our security features here. I've got 2-factor enabled on my login. So I'm going to take you in, and this is an example. I'm here in the master space right now. So you can see I've got this HIV community health application. This looks like any other application that I'm sure you guys have seen, and you can see I've got version 68 as my latest release. So this is my master space. Not a bunch of things look different. And then if I come in here to my downstream project space, this is what it looks like if I am one of those child spaces, one of those linked spaces. So the biggest thing you'll see here is that I'm actually not able to go in and see the forms and modules, and I'm certainly not able to edit them. And so this is what we mean when we say that the app is frozen. And here, if you're on the app settings, I, as a child space, also always can pull down that latest version. So it works in both a push and a pull model. Obviously, if you want a high degree of centralization, you might, as the master space, always want to push out the releases. But there is some control on this child space of whether they like to grab the newest version or not. And here, I want to show you one other thing. just quickly. So what we've got here, I'm in the linked projects menu here, and this again, back in the master space, you'll see all of the linked project spaces written here. I've only linked one of them for now. And this is how you go to release out content. So here you can see there's a bunch of things that you can release out. You've got all of your applications. You've got, I already added a bunch there. So you've got all your apps. This is my test space. There are a lot. Then you've got custom user fields. You can put any keywords that you've configured in. So I'll put one of those in. Any lookup tables you can put in. User roles, any reports. So like this is a report builder report that I did. So you choose all of the content you want to release and then all of the projects that you want to release it to. Again, I just have one, but we have some project spaces that have up to, I think, 100 child spaces, and you could have even more if that's what your project needed. And so you would add all your project spaces here, and then basically with one click, bulk release this out to everyone. So that was just a short demo. There's so much more we could talk about there, but we just wanted to showcase to you some of the features that we hope are making this sort of a model much easier. So going back to speaking more generally about, the same project in multiple geographies, what are the advantages of this sort of a model? First of all, the hugest one, of course, is that there's no additional project indicator definition. Since we assume that you work in the same sector with a similar intervention, once everyone agrees on those KPIs, they're kind of set, and there's no additional work that every individual project has to do to figure out how their indicators map to the global ones. Everyone's are mapped from day one. Similarly, there's no additional transformation of data that's needed. So you could feed, all of the data from 20 different project spaces into one dashboard, and then all of it would just look exactly the same since all the indicators were named the exact same thing. And of course, as I said, the release management is pretty easy if you use a tool like Enterprise Release Management. On the disadvantages side, though, we know that this doesn't work well for cross-sector projects, and I'm sure that many of you are in organizations where you need to compare projects that don't look very similar. So this is not going to be a model that works super great for you. In addition, the amount of in-app customization is very low in this. So if you had 20 countries and all of them wanted 5 customizations, that's now 100 customizations that you have to make at that master level, and that can get very, very hard to accommodate. So we do see a lot of organizations kind of saying, no, local customization is really not something that we let you do. And then lastly, it's a little bit hard to adjust to this model if it's not done from day one of the project. So, if you are using 5 different apps for essentially the same projects, but they're, the workflows are different or something, it would just be a bit of work to kind of reconfigure them into this sort of a model. So now let's switch gears and talk about if we have this fruit basket model, this sort of different projects. So these are any projects that do not and cannot use the same application for a variety of reasons. One, they might be totally different sectors. 2, they might be a different type of intervention. So maybe, I've got a family planning application, but one of them is all about behavior change communication, and the other one is about actually dispersing commodities. Those are not going to be very easy to compare either. Or maybe you are implementing the same intervention, but they're just highly customized workflows. And so in this case, what the organization is going to have to do is look across all of the projects and agree upon some common indicators. So it might be something like the number of beneficiaries served, the number of trainings or events that occurred, or maybe something like the percentage of beneficiaries that met our intended outcome from baseline to end line, something more general, sort of like that. And I just went over that very quickly, but I don't want to minimize how hard that work is. That is a lot of work. It takes a lot of coordination. And so the advantages, of course, are that you can now accommodate a wide range of sectors and implementations within this. It allows for way more customization of the app because everyone has their own app. They don't have to go to some sort of centralized body to make sure that they can make a change. And it gives projects autonomy over their own set of indicators while still making sure that HQ gets the global indicators. So if a project wants to add a KPI halfway through their project, it's not a big deal. They can add it, they can track it for themselves, as long as they're still giving that global indicator up. The disadvantages are really here almost about like level of coordination and level of work. It's a huge amount of collaboration and agreement that has to happen between your projects. And, if you're working globally, you might have teams all across the world. And so even just the logistics of getting time to collaborate might be very difficult. It also requires that each project map from the global indicators to their project indicators. So it's not just one process of mapping. If you have 20 projects that are all mapping to global indicators, they're going to need to do this work. 20 people are going to have to do this work, and it can be a lot of work. It's another level of indicator reporting for all the projects, and it also means that it's potentially less flexibility for making changes when they're in their applications if a change would affect a global indicator. And so to streamline that comparison, automate absolutely as much as possible. We hope that you would take advantage of a lot of our tools like custom exports and reports and our OData feeds. So if you've got a set of 10 KPIs you have to submit for the global indicators, you could very easily make one custom export just for those 10 indicators. Make it separated out, make sure that you've got it all streamlined as much as possible. And also consider using CommCare as your data aggregator, which Mala will be talking a bunch about because that's what Cole is doing. But no matter which model you choose, finding a way to evaluate all of your projects globally is a really important step in determining your organization's impact, which hopefully, makes everything better in terms of your external conversations, but also makes you as an organization feel better about the great work that you are doing. And so with that, I want to introduce Monica Lopez, who is the Director of Monitoring and Evaluation at ChildFund. Like I said, they are a little bit more closer to that apples to apples sort of comparison point with CommCare for about a little over a year and a half. And so Monica is going to give you just a whole bunch of information about where they've been on their global M&E journey. So Monica, over to you.
Thank you, Erin. And I learned something new today about that tool that I will ask you about later. So thank you, everybody. My name is Monica, and I am the Director of Monitoring and Evaluation at ChildFund International. I've been at ChildFund for almost 5 years, overseeing the evolution and implementation of our Global M&E System and strategy. I am part of an awesome team of evaluators that work in different aspects of M&E across our organization, and closely with an even larger group of M&E specialists across the globe. I am happy to have this opportunity to share a lot about the work that we are doing and how we're leveraging CommCare. So thank you for that. Just a little bit about, here we go. Just a little bit about who we are. ChildFund International is a nonprofit organization that works to support the change necessary to create the kinds of communities that protect, support, and value children so that they can thrive and achieve their fullest potential. We have an active presence in 20 countries. We work with, in partnership with approximately 240 local organizations, and through programming that addresses the developmental and protection needs of children and youth 0 to 24. Across the lifespan. So that's a little bit about who we are. Now, ChildFund's been around for more than 80 years. And in that time, our programming approach has evolved as we've come to understand the types of support that children need at different stages of development. We have a theory of change that guides our programming approach and that outlines how change happens and how the lives of children can change positively by that change. Our M&E system has also been evolving. So originally our focus was on basic accountability. So we wanted to make sure that children were present in communities, that they were participating in ChildFund sponsored activities and programs, that they were attending school, that they were healthy. But now we are more focused on our program quality and effectiveness. So we want to know whether our theory of change is right and whether our programming is having the intended results. We want to understand the experiences of children, whether their lives are improving or not. If they are, we want to know why. If they're not, we want to know why so that we can make the changes necessary to change that. So currently our M&E, Global M&E is comprised of a standard set of metrics that capture data for indicators tied to this basic accountability and also to our program theories of change. We also have a common data collection tool. So these are surveys and forms that are utilized across our country, our 20 country offices, and are translated into 14 languages. And we also have a standard process for analysis and for how we use the data for reflection and learning. Now, what this looks like in terms of implementation. So on an annual basis, our local partners and community volunteers go out in the field and interview more than 420,000 children or caregivers if children are 5 years or younger. So we capture data on these basic accountability standards and some other interesting data points. We also collect additional data on our programming indicators, but only for sample. So on a normal year, at full implementation, we're collecting this additional data on 75,000 children. So globally, we use this data to ensure that, obviously we're meeting our accountability goals and standards and to assess the quality of our programming and reach. So globally, we want to kind of look at that sort of the whole contribution. Locally, our country offices and our community partners use this data along with other data that they might collect to reflect and improve the reach and quality of their programming. And this is through a facilitated process of reflection and learning. Here, I want to say that in order for this to kind of work from like data collection to like this reflection process and for us to be able to use the information for making changes and adjustments, we need to make sure that all of these processes happen in a timely fashion. So, otherwise, if we don't have the information in time for the planning process, then obviously we've missed that mark. And this has been a challenge. Now, before CommCare, our global M&E process was, very manual and burdensome. So a lot of those interviews were done on paper. So people would go out and fill out these forms on paper, and then they would enter them into this website. And we had a lot of issues with the website because it was designed to collect sort of minimal data on basic accountability. But once we added these programming indicators and all these additional surveys, it was a lot of data for the website to handle. And so we had to enter data at all hours of the night, stagger the data entry. So it was really painful. Also, like getting the data out of the system was hard. And so we had to try to do it late at night or early in the morning. And sometimes we were successful. Sometimes we weren't successful. And so it was really hard to have the data that we needed to build, an analysis of trends, for instance. And also the reporting was slow. So, we were trying to get this reporting out before the planning cycle, but, we had to wait for the data entry to be finished and then try to get the data and then aggregate it. So it was like, oh my God, it was a lot of work, a lot of suffering. We needed to change that. So we experimented with different data collection tools, mobile data collection tools like ODK, before we started using CommCare about a year and a half ago. So what we had clear in our minds was that we needed to focus on the user experience and looking at different levels of users. So the field users, the country office users, and obviously cater also to our global needs. So we knew that the tool had to ease a lot of that burden at the local partner at the field level, but also bring value to them. So that was also important in our thinking. In particular, we wanted to make sure that they could track the data on the data collection effort, so that they know where they were at in terms of that. They weren't able to do that when we were doing this on paper. We also wanted to involve them in that process and to have more visibility ourselves on how the data collection process was taking place in the field. We had really limited visibility before, and so for us it was important that we knew how the process evolved, or to learn more about the process so that we can identify and better understand the pain points, and be able to address them. So when we contracted with CommCare, we had some clear objectives. We wanted to improve efficiencies to make the data collection easy, painless for our local partners. We wanted to have timely reporting so that we can make those really important deadlines for planning. We also wanted to standardize our approach to data collection. So we already had standard tools and a standard way of analyzing data, but we wanted to make sure to bring sort of the added consistency in terms of the process, and also some security elements that were missing. So we wanted to, one of the things that we really liked about CommCare is that through the use of locations, for instance, we were able to limit the data that our mobile users would be able to see, so they would only be able to see the data that was relevant to them. And so that was a big win for us. We also wanted to, through this, greater efficiencies, have a tool that our country offices and partners could leverage for other needs. So Erin talked a little bit about that. We do a lot of programming. We also implement grants. So if there was a need for something to collect data on grants, we wanted to provide the tool for them to do that. And also, with greater efficiencies, we wanted to have more time so that we can actually reflect on the data, because we felt like we were just, running around collecting data, reporting, and we never really had a lot of time to really think about what we were seeing. And I'm happy to say that CommCare really delivered on a lot of things. And so it's been like a huge change from the time that we started using CommCare back in 2020. And just to say that we started using CommCare right before the pandemic. So we had to build a tool in like a month. And I worked very closely with Erin. And then the pandemic hit, so everything shut down. But we still were able to use the tool because we kind of switched to phone interviews. So we were actually able to capture some of our response activities and how those were impacting our participants in the field. And we used CommCare, and that put us really on the map. We needed really to deliver on this investment, and I think we were able to do that and just get a lot of benefit from that. So these are some of the dashboards that we're very happy. The other thing we learned was that we had a lot of people. So how we are structured in terms of CommCare, we have a master space, as Erin was describing, and then we have other spaces that are that country offices use for deploying. And one thing we learned is that we had a lot of users in CommCare that don't always use CommCare to build reports or to view the data collection or whatever process. And so what we did was we leveraged that Power BI integration to be able to build reports so that people that are not like as engaged with CommCare could come and look at the reports and be able to know what's happening. And the other thing we did was we leveraged our use of SharePoint to build a mail site so that every time, like every opportunity we have, we direct people to our mail site where they can have access to all our reports. And these are dynamic. With the OData feeds, people can see the progress readily, over time. So that's been like a really huge thing. So kind of where we're at now is we're thinking about like how to improve our use of CommCare. So we've been learning a lot about sort of managing. Our initial approach was that we would have, this master space where we are collecting sort of these standard global M&E tools. And then, country offices are able to build and do whatever they need in their project spaces. But we're kind of learning that that can be kind of a little bit problematic because we're also trying to build a more integrated and more robust global M&E system where we're integrating all kinds of different sources of data. And so we need to have sort of better control is a bad word, but more order to this Wild West that we have created. We also learned that we need to address sort of the capacity of our local, our country office users. So they want to build things. And obviously you need to kind of understand how CommCare works and, you know, all the other features that are in there to help you manage the process well. And we're a small team, so we've been having a difficulty kind of getting that level of capacity. And so we're thinking about, well, how do we build a cadre of M&E folks that are building apps, testing before they're deployed, and so that we have a better ability to support them and you know, more standardization. Also thinking about how we leverage CommCare for other things. So we have other processes within the organization that are not M&E processes but involve data collection. So how do we leverage CommCare to make those processes easier? Because eventually they lessen the burden on our country offices and our local partners. And also like how we are able to integrate the information in CommCare with other systems that we use, like Salesforce or, you know, our finance, so that we can get a better picture of our contribution, our cost, and everything that we need to make better decisions about our programming. And so that's me, and thank you so much for this opportunity. And I hand it over to Erin.
Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing your story. And maybe it's because I don't have a sense of time anymore because of the pandemic, but I think it's amazing the sort of progress that you guys have been able to make in just over a year, and especially given the fact that the pandemic did interrupt a lot of your operations. So I hope that a lot of you guys that are listening today and saw those beautiful dashboards are kind of inspired by what you guys might be able to do in really not that much time. So now we want to pass it over to Mala Ram, who is the MIS Systems Manager at Goal. Goal has been using CommCare for several years, longer than I've even been running the customer success team. And they've always had an eye on looking at their indicators at a more global level. And they've implemented what I think is a pretty interesting system using what they're calling SCORE. So Mala, I'll toss it over to you to tell us a little bit about the cross-sector fruit basket model.
Great, thanks, Sarah. I hope everyone can see the screen and can hear me okay. So yes, as Erin said, I'm going to talk to you about Goal's SCORE system for the next few minutes. My name's Mala. I am the Management Information Systems Manager at Goal. And basically what that means is I have oversight of the use of CommCare for data collection and storage, and also Power BI for data analysis and reporting across the organization for monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning purposes. So in terms of our meal for the organization, I think it's a good point to start off by explaining just a little bit about Goal. Goal is really diverse in what it does. Established in 1977, since then we've responded to emergencies across 60 different countries, but our response is always coupled with some development work as well. So it's not just the response emergency sector we work across. We work with health services, wash interventions on livelihoods, food security, and the rest of it. 5 or so grants operating in 14 countries. And the grants are really varied. They're funded by different donors. They have different timeframes. Some are as short as a month, some are as long as multiple years, up to 4 or 5 years. They are obviously to do with different things, so offering different services and interventions. And also the country offices and the staff who implement these programs and do the work we consider and call goalies, there's a lot of difference there as well. when it comes to meal, we have different sizes of teams across the different country offices, and within those teams there's different layers of capacity as well, particularly when it comes around to the use of platforms and technology for digital data. In terms of CommCare, as Erin mentioned, there's been at least 5 years of it being on Goal's radar and various stages of it being trialed, implemented, piloted. And for the last few years, I've been at Goal for the last year and a half. It's certainly been a really stronghold part of data for meal. But given that, there's still some variation in terms of the data we collect in CommCare. Sometimes paper forms are still necessary, and there are data lying around in paper and Excel files. Sometimes we have donors or partners that request the use of other digital platforms. So just to say, there's a whole lot that goes on when it comes to just starting to think about the standardization of information. At Goal, for meal, it's not just M&E. We have 4 main types of information. For accountability purposes, we have a really strong, extensive, robust community feedback mechanism. And so we have a lot of data that comes in regarding the communications through that mechanism, who's communicating through that mechanism, what they're communicating about, etc., etc. We have people reach, so like most NGOs, we want to be able to report that really big number to say that Goal has reached this amount of people every year. It's really important for external communications, and it does really help. But with that, there's a lot of consideration that needs to go in to make sure that number is as accurate and not overestimated, because it's of M&E, and that's around indicators. And Erin talked about trying to have these standardized KPIs. For our strategy, despite the diversity of our programming and the amount of information that we collect, for our 3-year strategy, we do have a results framework, and that does have 24 essentially KPIs, but what we call global goal indicators that are tracked across the different programs. Now, typically, all the indicators are not going to be relevant for all the grants. So a grant would typically have about 1 to 5 of the global goal indicators incorporated into its log frame for monitoring. But when it comes to global goal indicators, similarly to the people reach, all totals, so not just looking at the grant level result, but making sure that we are able to aggregate that up and have country level and organizational totals for these indicators. And then the biggest part of it is the rest of the indicators, the programmatic indicators that are in every grant has a log frame, a results framework. There are between like 10 and 70 indicators. There is a huge variety in indicators. We all know they can measure different things. They could be numbers or percentages or ratios. They could be counting people or communities or commodities or cash. They can also be measured in different frequencies. And at any one time, I think Goal probably monitors about 5,000 different indicators at any one time. And given the short-term nature of our programming, or a lot of our programming, that is constantly changing. So we have all this information in various spots. How are we supposed to, or how were we supposed to consolidate all of that up and have the information more usable? There were various systems in place over the last few years, some in Excel, some using Power BI, but I guess the first start, one of the first questions you need to ask yourself when building an M&E system is what platform you want to use. So everything was done in consultation with the meal staff in the country offices that are working with these information firsthand. So we had various considerations, budget limitations, time frame by which we wanted to get things out. But essentially, I mean, the main decision was the fact that 5 years, a lot of our staff had been using CommCare, were familiar with the system. And because the flexibility that CommCare provides, we knew we could really build a purpose-built, fit-for-purpose system within it to collect exactly what information Goal needed for its reporting. So we at HQ support country offices to use CommCare, as I said, for data collection and storage, and Power BI for analysis and reporting. So we practiced what we preached. We essentially set up the system to use those two platforms like any other type of M&E system that we recommend in Goal. So the system's called SCORE. It is a little bit of an acronym, but more it's a catchy title that goes well with us being called Goal. And we started the design of it last year, and now in this year, well, at the end of last year we had a pilot, and this year we fully rolled out to all the country offices. So the app in CommCare, it is used as a web app because the meal staff are sitting at their desks instead of on their mobile, but it works the same. We've obviously employed the case management function in CommCare to be able to data. And for us, the grant is that critical case that everything belongs to. I know my internet's a little bit unstable. I'm just wondering whether I should turn my video off or not. Erin, can you give me a nod if you think it might be better if the video goes off?
You've been okay. You've chopped up a little bit, but I think you're okay to keep it on.
Okay, cool. So yes, we've got case management. There are various levels of parent and child cases. There are different types of cases as well. The other thing that was really critical was that we had full front-end functionality for the data enterers, because the data and the meal results remain the country offices. They are the owners. They've done the hard work in collecting the information and calculating these results. And we wanted it to be a system that was their own, that they could completely have complete control over what is going in there. So there are forms that the user can edit previously entered data in, and they're able to delete or archive straight from the front end. So it's actually only HQ that has access to the back end of SCORE in CommCare. Everything else is done at the front level. Now, there's obviously so many considerations that need to be made at the design stage of building a global M&E system, but I only have time to pick just one. And for Goal, this was the most important. I'm not saying this is going to be the same for every organization, but really for our needs, the biggest thing that we needed to make clear decisions on and improve on any previous system was to obtain unique results for country and organization, but then also have complete results at a grant level. So previously, at HQ, we only requested results that had already been reduced and avoiding double counting. So that if we were to look at a result provided to HQ for a grant, we were actually not seeing the full extent of that result, because if a grant had worked with the same people as another grant, or if somebody had received a service or participated in an intervention in multiple quarters of the year, they would have been double counted. And so previously we only asked for adjusted numbers to come in so that at HQ, for strategic purposes, we could have country level totals and we could have organizational level totals. But the problem is, if you're a programmatic member of staff wanting to know the grant by grant detail, you would see the results that we had centrally would be different from what was being reported to donors and what the full true results were. So for us, what SCORE does is actually capture multiple different data sets, but really for the same thing, so that we have so much more purpose and use for the information that we are consolidating and having at an organizational level. So to finish off, all of this information that we've been collecting has been pulled through into Power BI dashboards, and like ChildFund, we even share it across the organization through SharePoint. There's multiple pages within each sector because we've been able to capture so much different information through CommCare, through an app, that has somehow been able to capture all the different nuances that come with our indicators, that come with our programming. And we now have essentially a single source of truth for meal information. Owner report or a spreadsheet with some random raw data to sit on individual staff's machine. And for there to be a huge email trail trying to find old reports or old results. Everything is now essentially, will be, I will say, in one system. And yeah, it's due to the fact that we know we want to make this information more usable. I mean, Monica's hinted on it, there's no point, there's so much we can do with it. But given the diversity of the information that we had at Goal, SCORE was what we needed to consolidate that, synthesize it, and turn kind of essentially bits of results here and there into some really usable insight. The final thing I want to leave you guys with is the one, if anyone is planning on building a global M&E system now, my one main piece of advice is keep in mind your end outputs, not just that, okay, you want a dashboard attached to it. Like, think about the visuals, think about the analyses you want to do with the data you're collecting, because if you always keep that end bit in mind, then it will affect all your decision making in terms of the design of everything that comes before it. So always think about your end product. I mean, my other second caveat I said I was in is mention one is always think a tool developed by HQ, but now what I'm telling a whole organization, it's not an HQ tool, it's an organizational tool. So yeah, that's SCORE. And the final thing is just say thank you for the time. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you to all Goals meal staff for entering the data. It's a long slog. Yeah, I know it's taken time, but they've done great in terms of getting used to the system. Also, the one reason we were able to get SCORE up and running so quickly was that we did hire an external consultant called Raneem Safi. She is a certified Demagi partner, and without her, we wouldn't have been so far down the line with SCORE. So thanks to everyone basically that's been involved, and also thank you for listening, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Mala. And I'm sure you and Monica both were not looking at the chat box as you came in, but there are lots of wows about all your dashboards. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heinz from our team, who is going to go through some of the questions that have been coming in during the course of this webinar. So Heinz, if you want to take it away.
Excellent. I'll just read them from the top, and maybe Dave Moore can also join in this. Gary asked, what might KPIs for multi-sector projects look like?
Yeah, Mala, do you want to take that one?
I think that's why some of our log frames are so big, because indicators are there to capture the depth and breadth of the work, and to be able to fully explain what we do and the multifaceted approach. You're never going to have the most concise indicator that can take that up. But also that's why log frames are designed to have various levels. So if you are designing your outputs and your outcomes, I mean, it should really be like a pyramid where the higher up you get in terms of defining your indicator, the more that indicator should encompass. So it might not matter actually in the end what intervention it is, because the next levels and the knock-on effect of what you've done is being captured through the indicators. But yeah, certainly at lower levels, to fully explain things, you do need a fair few indicators. Also, I mean, we're talking about quantitative data here. You always have the option of qualitative, more evaluative results and ways of using that as well. So,
you want to jump in, Dave?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Yeah, just looking to the list quickly. Molly, from our MSI Enterprise Partners, asked a very interesting question. Great presentation. Thank you so much, Monica. I'm interested in how you measure progress towards your overarching objectives. Improving efficiency in M&E, standardizing M&E processes and tools, and creating a data-driven culture. Are there any specific indicators you use to track achievements of these?
So yeah, I read that comment, and well, I would say we're currently working on some of that. So in particular, related to the piece about the learning. So we have this sort of facilitated process of reflection and learning, the guidance that comes with it. And a year ago, this was sort of a recommended practice. Obviously, we have to have our data collection in place and working at a timely way. But now we're actually making that as part of our BSC's, our balanced scorecard. So we'll be measuring sort of whether that's happening or not. And we're also supporting our local partners in that process. So having obviously the data in place is essential. So we have to have it there, and then having a support in place to be able to understand how we use this data for answering some of these questions that we want to know, like, are we making a difference? Obviously, our indicators are very high level, tied to our theories of change. We program to those. And so by looking at how those indicators are either changing or not, or what they're telling us, we're able to say, well, how is our programming affecting? Are we programming in the right areas? Are we partnering with the right organizations to make those changes happen? What else do we need to do to make sure that we're making the changes that we want? So it is a very collaborative process. It's not just an M&E process. So we do involve our program staff, our technical specialists, and we all have ownership of this. And we're kind of constantly working on, sending those messages out. But it's a work in progress for sure. And it takes years, I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Monica. Next one. Richard Fritz from Bell Hunger Health asked a very interesting question, and Mala and Monica, I think it would be great to hear both your voices on this. How do you manage data quality in general? To what extent can CommCare help to make sure that your dashboards are, reflect quality data?
I'll go first then. So we're at the start of using it. Quarter one was goals, first quarter with a lot of information going in SCORE. So actually the last 2 months of my life has been spent checking the quality of information. There's a few things that we need to take into account. I mean, firstly, for SCORE, we are talking about the end results. So there's actually a lot of places and opportunities before we even get to that where data quality should be checked. So routine data quality audits should be taken into account, where you are following the data from collecting in the field to whatever systems and processes it travels through. for us and for scoring it, and particularly in terms of CommCare, the case list explorer that is there is a great way for me to I know where the kind of pain points are, where sometimes there may not be a correct indicator being indicators being defined properly, so that the system works in terms of the automation. So I can quickly find cases where I know there may be issues, so I can look in without having to worry about going into the dashboard or finding particular results. I can see the raw data in the back end of CommCare and find exactly what I need. And yeah, for me, it's using the case list a lot, but it's also making sure that we're working with our country offices who are the ones entering the data and managing that as well. But there's a few things in CommCare that, yeah, for me, it's the case list explorer.
So I remember when we first started talking to CommCare about this, and I remember Dev saying, you have to make sure you test your application. When you build it, you test it, you make sure it's working right. So, that's sort of, to me, the entry point. And building checks in places like using hidden values to like be able to kind of check sort of the, the workflow, et cetera. The other thing I've been really big in promoting, and I say it all the time, and people will know that I say this, is use your worker reports. So look at form submission. Look at deployment management. So make sure people are using the right version of the application, especially if you have like done several iterations. Look at your data every day. I do. I know that so I use this the Power BI integration tool. So I'm feeding this data as it's coming into a report that's looking at the things that we need to pay attention to. Our children in schools, and I know the data well, so I can identify where things look off. And so obviously that's there for everybody to look at, to monitor if anything, looks amiss, if anything is not working right. So like there's a lot of tools in CommCare to be able to manage that process to the point that I can actually go and look at a mobile worker. And so I've demoed some of these features for our country office staff, and it's just sort of really promoting these tools that people on the ground that are closest to the data collection can start using them and actually managing the process, being able to proactively address any issues. So that's sort of the thing.
Yeah, and I think that's just a great reminder that the best way to ensure that there's clean data in your global indicators is making sure that it's clean when it comes in. So I know we're a minute over time. I wanted to say a huge thank you to both Monica and Mala for sharing your stories. I think we can sit up here and say anything we want, but it's really you guys that are doing the work. So I know everyone appreciates the perspectives of people who have actually gotten to implement this in their organizations. I know we've talked a little bit about data-driven decision-making, and I just wanted to point out we do have a webinar, our last webinar that's up, the recording of that talked about data-driven decision-making, and we will have a written guide coming out as well. We'll be sending out, anyone who asked a question that didn't get it answered, we will be sending those out, responses to those out, so please look for those. And we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar for all of you guys to see. So thank you so much for spending your morning, midday, afternoon, evening with us, wherever you are. We appreciate it. And again, huge thanks to Monica and Mala for sharing your stories.